to you, and he's got some, I'm going to have to put up with you the disclaimer that if I recommend an article, it doesn't mean I agree with everything in it. I just think it's worth reading because it's generally true. But this is a good website.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually just called kjvbible.org. But I'm going to send it to you and post it. Because there's two gap problems in the Bible. And one is at the very beginning in Genesis 1 and 2. And that's what this website I have pulled up deals with. And this is the second gap. So was it 490 consecutive weeks or was it 483? It was reserved. And that's your Revelation time period. Which is it? Was there a gap or no gap? And I wish I'd done that today because I'm going to redo it or add some more and do it better because there's some more that has to be done to show. There's some pretty good articles that go into the dating of Jesus' birth. And I'll send one of those over to you also. I mean, there's men who did detailed studies on the courses of the priesthood and went back and corrected these. Now with the astronomical record, they can find out where some of the earlier astronomers, like one of the Ptolemies, where they were off.
Yeah.
And they know exactly when these eclipses took place and this and that. And, there's good articles that show that Christ was actually born 3 years before our current date, 2015, shows.
Well, I wish when you send me a link, you would send me a couple of sentences to go with the link so I can post that too.
Yeah, I will. I haven't figured it out yet because it's hard to categorize everything.
I know, that's right. That's right. Well, and don't worry, we can always do it later.
Yeah, I'm going to work on it some more. But, we're going to have articles on Bible prophecy, Bible law, Bible history. And we're going to have articles on timeline and date of Jesus' birth. And we'll have all those different categories. And the disclaimer at the top that because most of this good information, remember, we have very few people in Christian identity, so we don't have all these scholars that they've had for all these centuries and all these, researchers and all these millions of Christian websites, because you can find very good things, and yet, like Chris White, did I mention, he's a universalist.
Yeah.
Nothing of Israel is,
Well, I'd like to make a fine point on this universalism question. I think you are unusual in that you claim that God does not hate the other races. He just doesn't make a covenant with them. And so in a sense, everyone, the whole world does benefit by the covenant. But the covenant is, as you say, clearly only with one group of people, one family line.
Well, we showed where the other people of the earth find their salvation when they're delivered into the glorious liberty of the sons of God.
Yes.
Adam's restored to his former immortality and becomes God of the world again, the Son of God. In the spirit, we're sons of God. That's the spirit of adoption. But the resurrection is the redemption of the body. That's the real adoption. So we went through it. They'll say, but the other people are sinners, and they need to be redeemed too. The problem is, they didn't fall.
Very good.
The Bible's fall of Adam.
Very good.
The restoration of Adam to it.
Right, good distinction. On the other hand, Keith, they are prey, as are all people. Everyone is prey to error and sin, right? So one question is, how does everyone, Israel and non-Israel, achieve salvation from their natural errors and sins?
Well, what we're talking about is a book that's written to the race of Adam. This is the book of the generation of Adam. It's the fall of Adam, the restoration of Adam, and God forming out of Adam his covenant people Israel.
Okay, so the answer to my question is that is not the question that is addressed in the covenant question.
Well, what it is the Enosh, the mortal men, were created mortal. They didn't fall into mortality.
No, we understand. Yeah. So let me ask you again. Am I correct then in saying that this whole argument that you're making does not address the question of salvation from human error?
Well, I'm not sure I'm of human error.
Right. See, I've always thought that the Bible taught people how to achieve victory over their own sinful nature. But apparently that is incorrect, and that all this addresses is the importance of the Israelite families to accept their status as parties to the covenant and act accordingly.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean,
Right, that's right. I'm starting to get that.
What we're going through is what people just won't believe, but the Old and New Covenant were made with one family.
Okay. I'm so glad that I was able to clear that up. Okay.
Well, everybody descended from Jacob and his 4 wives are Israel, and that's why I was going to go into the 3 confirmations. The covenant was confirmed with Abraham, it was confirmed with Isaac, then it was confirmed with Jacob for a law. That's Psalm 105.
Yes.
Then, after they went to Egypt, it was confirmed again. That's because the birthright had to be taken from Reuben and given to the 2 sons of Joseph, which Jacob adopted as his own. That's why Joseph's house is divided into Ephraim and Manasseh, his 2 sons. That's why we have 13 tribes, but we have 12 tribes that become 13 tribes. That's the house of Joseph divided, and Ephraim, the younger son, got the blessing. And I was going to go through that. I was going to do that. I really shouldn't have gone to that. I just wanted to get that off my chest, that there is a way to prove that the Bible is exactly accurate to the most weighted event in history, which was the Messiah to come. And that's when Christ was baptized in the Jordan River, and the dove descended, and this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. And that's when he began his ministry, 3.5 years. But here's what I was just going to say. Just listen to a few things here. Because remember Romans 8, when we went into this in verse 20 of Romans 8, for the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly. That's the other men and women of the earth who are not of Adam, but by reason of him who was subjected the same in hope. And we know that because Adam sinned willingly. Eve did not. She was deceived. Adam partook of it.
Okay.
Some of us believe that that's because of Adam's love for Eve and God's will, that he wasn't going to let her die alone as a mortal and stay immortal. They were both going to fall. However it worked. But anyway, verse 21 of Romans 8, because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God.
Beautiful.
Children of God are Israel. The resurrected saints are going to be kings and priests under the King of Kings in this one world government under Jesus Christ. They're going to be delivered into glorious liberty after the resurrection, when the kingdoms of this world become the kingdoms of our Lord. 22, for we know that the whole creation groaneth and travail in pain together until now. Now listen, verse 23. And not only they, but ourselves also. So he's separating the two. Paul's an Israelite. Paul's of the elect. Paul's of the chosen covenant people. Paul's raised to be apostle and elder in the church. Paul's inspired to write these words in Romans. So he's making a division. It says, and not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. These people have been told over and over again that they're Gentiles, not knowing the Gentiles were actually Israelites, and that because they're Gentiles and not Israelites, and the covenant's made with Israel, that they had to be adopted into the covenant. But the adoption doesn't have anything to do with taking any people of any other family of the earth and making part of God's covenant people. It has to do with exactly what Paul just said, the redemption of our body. That's the resurrection. Nobody's been resurrected yet save Jesus Christ. The dead are still disembodied. They're alive. They're conscious. They speak. They're alive. Abraham's living. That's what Christ also said in Matthew 22:32. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's one deep part of Romans 8 that shows the division. I was going to go through more because we were doing a study on 144 times the name Israel, and Adam appears. Romans 15:8 is another one. Now I say that Jesus Christ was a minister of the circumcision for the truth of God, to confirm the promises made unto the fathers. God from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob?
Well, I think that there are people who believe that they are. I don't, of course, and you've made it clear it's not true, but I think the uneducated people probably do believe that.
No, they don't. What they do is spiritualize it.
Oh, sorry, you're so right.
Become spiritual Israelites by believing in Christ.
All right, you're right. You're right.
How they're adopted into the covenant.
You're right, yeah.
They say they misuse all the words in it.
That's right.
Spiritual Israel, there's no spiritual covenant. There's no covenant of grace. This is all made up.
All made up, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because then he goes on in verse 9 of Romans chapter 15, verse 9, and that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy, as it is written, for this cause I will confess to thee among the Gentiles and sing unto thy name. But if they'd gone back to Romans 9, as you and I have done several times, and we just did recently, Romans 9:24 to 26, which directs us back to Hosea, then they could read Hosea 4 through 10 and understand that the Gentiles are none other than the kingdom of the house of Israel. They're Israelites.
The northern kingdom.
Yeah, the northern 10-tribe kingdom.
That's right, yeah.
So that's why it's so frustrating, because you got to put a lot of time, and, what have we done here? Maybe a dozen verses of the Old and New out of 144 in the New?
Well, I'm telling you, you picked up a pretty big job when you decided to teach the Bible to people. But you picked up that job before I ever met you, because I heard you preaching on RBN about 7 or 8 years ago.
Well, I didn't actually decide. I was waiting to find, 2 or 3 to get together in unity and then do it, but that day never came, and I just got so fed up with what I was hearing, I just had to try and say something.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is, there's no end to your job, Keith. It's going to go on until the day you die.
Well, it's I'm waiting. These other guys say it. Well, show me the verses, and I'll be corrected. And then you do it, and they're never corrected. And I haven't gotten anybody send me any verses that argue with what I say. I haven't gotten any response, period.
No, because as you said, they won't even read your verses. So how can they possibly argue against them?
Right. They just turn off as soon as you say something. Because, see, the truth is offensive. Christ is a rock of offense.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't la-la land, lovey-lovey, it's all peace and love, and don't talk about race, and don't talk about divisions, and don't talk about the origins of the seed of the serpent, the seed of the woman.
Well, they especially don't like that seed of the serpent doctrine.
No, but they certainly don't like God having a creation order, or Adam.
Right, they don't like the creation order, and they don't like the chosen people doctrine.
No, they have to do away with all that.
That's right.
Well, anyway, so, we can go on and read, I can look up more verses with Israel and Abraham and read through them. We've already gone through some of the most important ones, but I'm going to go to Luke. I never got this one, and I'm going to do Luke here.
Well, I got time as long as you've got the energy.
How long have we been on now?
About 1 hour.
Oh, no, wait a minute. I called you at 3:15. Oh, man, I think it's been an hour and 45 minutes. But all right, let's just hear. We've done this so many times too, but we're doing this for Lois and for Susan. And,
that's right, and for the new people that are going to keep coming in.
Yeah, you never know where they might start listening, because these are important. How clear can this get? In Luke chapter 1, and we'll start with verse 67. And his father Zacharias, that's Father John the Baptist, was filled with the Holy Ghost and prophesied, saying, Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he hath visited and redeemed his people, and hath raised up an horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he spoke by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us, to perform the mercy promised to our fathers, this is verse 72, and to remember his holy covenant, 73, the oath which he swore to our father Abraham, verse 74, that he would grant unto us that we, being delivered out of the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear, 75, in holiness and righteousness before him all the days of our life. Verse 76, and thou, child, shalt be called the prophet of the highest, speaking in John the Baptist, shall go before the face of the Lord to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of salvation unto his people by the remission of their sins, through the tender mercy of our God, whereby the dayspring from on high hath visited us, to give light to them that sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. And the child grew and waxed strong in spirit and was in the deserts till the day of his showing into Israel. So, all right, he's prophesying. This is at the birth of Christ. It's not at the time when he shed his blood, and that's when atonement and redemption happened. So it's a prophecy. It was going to be fulfilled in 33 years. That's when his people, Israel, were going to be redeemed. And it brings up Abraham again, the oath. It goes back to the original covenant. But these Protestants, denominational, non-denominational, Catholics, all the other 19th century cults, they can't hear that until they understand that the Gentiles were Israelites. I can't understand it at all until they understand if they're Israel, that, they're the children of Abraham, literally, according to the flesh. And that's why we go to Romans 9:3-5 all the time. The adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of God and the promises all pertain to Israel according to the flesh. He says flesh twice, in verse 3 and verse 5. And he wraps up the most important parts of Christianity, those 6 things: adoption, glory, covenants, giving the law, service of God, and the promises is Israel according to the flesh. And the whole Christian world can't believe that because of all this lie on top of lie and misidentifying who the Gentiles are. And that's the other thing I was going to say, back onto the idea about the confirmation of the covenant in the 430-year time period in Galatians 3. That was when they arrived in Egypt, because there was 2 things that had to be done. Jacob had to adopt the 2 sons of Joseph for his own. Then he had to prophesy over his sons and attach the symbols to each tribe. They each had a symbol that was going to carry on into history that shows how we can identify Israel. And that's why I talk about the book Symbols of Our Celto-Saxon Heritage. It's a marvelous book. It's got the pictures. It lays it out. And, but it does have the one flaw that the man who wrote it happens to be British Israel. And so if you talk to someone in British Israel and they're still waiting for this reconciliation between Jews, who they mistakenly to be the house of Judah, and the house of Israel, then you can take them to Ephesians 2 and show them, no, that was already done with the blood of Christ.
Wait, I think you just misspoke yourself. You said they mistakenly confused Jews for being from the house of Judah, and I think you meant to say Jews as being today's Jews.
No, I didn't say it clearly enough. I'll give you that. But what I meant is that's what British Israelite believers believe. That the Jews are the house of Judah.
That Jews are from the house of Judah. Right, thank you.
Jews are Edomites.
Right, exactly. That today's Jews who claim to be Jews are not from the house of Judah.
That's right. But they believe that in British Israel.
That's right. That's right.
And that's why they have to have this reconciliation at the end between the Jews and, the 10-tribe house of Israel, which they believe themselves to be, being English, Anglo-Saxon, British Israelism. And it's a major mistake. But the guy who wrote the book, I'm just saying that if you understand Ephesians 2, you can show somebody in British Israel, and they probably won't believe you. You don't find many people, taking correction once they're into some kind of system, especially the pastors of it. But you could at least prove to them whether they accept it or not. That's between them and God. You did your part. You told them the truth. Ephesians 2 shows that there's no future joining of the house of Israel and the house of Judah. That was accomplished with the blood of Christ.
Right.
So, anyway, so that's just another one. Luke 1:67. We read to the end of the chapter 80. That's another one you can put on the there to pick up a Bible or a concordance, but there's this book called Halley's Bible Handbook. And I don't remember ever hearing about it, but it made quite an impression. They've got here in the beginning, they've got the printing history, first edition, 1924, 10,000 copies. Then they got about 10 of those going up to 1938. Then 15,000 copies in the 13th edition. Then it goes to 30,000 for 5 editions. I mean, it goes on and on. 50,000, 60,000, year after year. I don't know. I didn't add them all up, but I don't know how many millions there are altogether. I happen to get one. This is the, I got the 1965. It's revised. It's a little book. Well, it's a little book in size. It's not like a full-size book, but it's got, well, you know, it's got 854 pages. And it's kind of interesting. See, it's got, I'll read some of the contents here just for a second. If you're interested in this, Mona, I can, you know, if you want me to go through a little bit of this, because...
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he lists a lot of his sources, and then he's got sections on church history. He's got an archaeological section, which is really the reason why I got it. But in the contents, it goes through... What he does is a summary of every chapter and book of the Bible. Some of it's good, and I found some mistakes already, you know, that I'll talk about. But he's got a section from page 741 to 756, how we got the Bible. Then he's got an outline of Bible history for about another, for all 40-some pages, about 50, really. And he says, he's got one page, and this is what I was going to read, but I'll do it next time. But he's got most important thing in this book. He's got something interesting to say, and that's 4 pages from 814 to 818. Then he talks about habit of going to church, and yeah, I agree, except find a church where it's teaching the truth, and I'll go there, you know. And then it has a whole section on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then it has a list of places of archaeological discovery. That's 847. And the interesting thing about this is, and there's good web, you know, you can go online. There's one, I remember, there was something like top 400 archaeological finds to prove the Bible or verify the Bible. But he's got, first he starts out with summary of places in 847. I'm looking for this summary of, I just got this recently, like about a week ago, and I'm trying to, where are you here? I have to go back to the context. Oh, his list of places. Yeah, that's not the one I'm looking for. This goes down, copy in. Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Sorry, here. He's actually got, in the context, he's got photographic illustrations of all these, like the Behistun rock and the pre-flood tablet and the pre-flood seals and the stele of Sargon's daughter, and it's just so interesting because if I can find one section, I can go to it, but it's a list of places. That's kind of strange. I'm missing it here. This is a long index. I mean, you're looking, he's got charts, maps, he's got summaries, population study, how many Catholics in 1960, how many Protestants, each one broke. It's just a handbook that has so much in it that it's not a bad thing. And if I remember right, it was like $6. Well, maybe 10 with shipping. But I'll get into it more next time because I'm not finding the place that I was going to. I can't find it in the index, so I'll have to go through it and find it again. But because the summary of places are where the archaeological things was found, but there's an actual section that has the actual discoveries, and it has a little blurb about them, but most of the time it'll have a reference back to the text where it'll give a couple pages and goes into more depth on each one of these finds. It's fascinating. It really is. I've always thought that we're in a world that is so confused about our Christian faith, and I wonder how many millions stopped going to church because they realized that they weren't inside, in the inner man of the heart, they weren't spiritually fed.
Well, I sure did.
And then you wonder, well, how could you help somebody maybe come back into trusting the Bible again? And we have so many people that are critics of the Bible and so many in identity, like Eli James and the rest of them. They're just destroying people's faith. But I just think that looking at this archaeological record, people might just open their eyes and start trusting the Bible again. Anyway, I think that's something that needs to... It's not like it isn't there. You can go to plenty of YouTubes, but now we're living in a chaotic world and everybody wants to see what the New World Order is doing and what the bankers are when it collapses and all this stuff. And most people aren't going to do searches for, on biblical archaeology, but it's there on YouTube and it's there on websites and it's there. In fact, I got 2 other books. This one was, this is really interesting, and I've been highlighting it, but this is another one for the record. If somebody, this was in a dollar bin. Perfectly, it was like just about unused condition. There was only a couple notes made in the text, but Archaeology in the Old Testament by a man named Alfred J. Horth, Hoerth. I didn't look it up on Amazon, but might be one you can get there cheap, because some of them are, some of these great books are 99 cents, but you have to pay $4 shipping. And then I did a search on Amazon, and another guy was inspired by this book. His name's John McRae, M-C-R-A-Y, and he did Archaeology in the New Testament. And I've only looked a few minutes in that. I've read through about a third of the archaeology in the Old Testament, but oh boy, we could do weeks just on what was found. I don't know. There's just 3 recommendations. So, Halley's Handbook and Archaeology in the Old Testament and Archaeology in the New Testament. But anyway, I didn't get to what I wanted to do about just a few verses on carnally minded, but it's coming up on 2 hours, and I think that's enough for today. What do you think, Mona?
It's absolutely up to you. If you have the energy to do it, I think you should do it, because I think you'll feel better. And then I can split this little talk up into 2 sections so that people won't be overwhelmed.
Well, I think... all right, we'll just finish up this one with, just a few more minutes. And this is the difference about when we trust in our mind and trust in our flesh and natural body. We're going to go to Romans, again, into Romans 8. Romans is just if we could just get most of these Protestants to understand the book of Romans, then, the church could be rebuilt again, especially Romans and Hebrews. But it's just so hard to get anybody to dare to think that maybe everything they've been taught their whole life is on a wrong foundation, and really a lie. To get them to open their mind to look at the evidence and have the time to go through the doctrines, it's just, most people don't have the patience, or their heart's not right. But I just wrote down a few. This is the word carnally. Romans 8:6. I'm going to go back a few too. We'll read just from verse 1. There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For the law of life in Christ Jesus hath made me free from the law of sin and death. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, in the likeness of, there was no sin in his flesh, likeness of it, and for sin, condemned sin in the flesh, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Then there's, the next verse, verse 7, Romans chapter 8. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. And then going to 1 Corinthians 2:14, Paul explains the basic same topic a different way. Different words, same thing. 1 Corinthians 2. I just wrote down the key verse 14 here, but it says, I'll start reading at this is, everything is just so rich in Corinthians and Rome. Well, I mean, every book, but I mean, where do you even start reading? I'll read verse 7. Well, now I'm going to go back further even. Let's see. Paul's explaining verse 2, for I determined not to know anything among you, to the Corinthians, save Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. And my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Howbeit we speak wisdom among them that are perfect, yet not the wisdom of this world, nor of the princes of this world that come to naught, but we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, even the hidden wisdom, which God ordained before the world unto our glory. Verse 8, which none of the princes of this world knew, for had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory, because that ended Satan's power over death and hell. Christ actually deceived the great deceiver Satan into stirring up the hearts of the men to crucify him. Anyway, 9, but as it is written, eye hath not seen nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. So we can't really know all the glory and what it would be like in the everlasting kingdom in the earth. But it says, verse 10, but God hath revealed them unto us by his Spirit. For the Spirit searcheth all things, yea, the deep things of God. For what man knoweth the things of a man, save the spirit of man which is in him? Even so the things of God knoweth no man, but the Spirit of God. He said, now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given to us of God. Which things also we speak, not in the words which man's wisdom teacheth, but which the Holy Ghost teacheth, comparing spiritual things with spiritual. But the natural man, this is verse 14, but the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. Verse 15, but he that is spiritual judgeth all things, yet he himself is judged of no man. And last verse 16, for who hath known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. So that's a passage about carnal-minded and carnally minded. It's destruction. I had other things. I had so much stuff pulled up yesterday. I had this sermon by Chuck Baldwin on First Amendment radio. Oh, and this man goes on, and he starts talking louder and louder and starts screaming and stuff, and he's never heard the truth at all. He's a totally natural man, carnally minded. But they all are. None of these universalists have the truth, and they're almost all universalists. They don't know anything about a covenant, law. They don't understand. They're insane every time they preach, but they get so good at their stage act. And using their voice control and inflection and sounding, sincere and all this. And he didn't say anything that made sense. In fact, while we close out here, this is what he did. He took, and I had trouble with this in an identity church that people didn't get. In Matthew 23, Christ explains the problem with the Pharisees. In fact, it's chapter 23, verse 23 of Matthew. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith, These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. So this guy goes on for an hour, blabbering on, and he actually puts a colon instead of a comma after weightier matters of the law. As if the weightier matters of the law were the judgment, mercy, and faith, when the truth is, if they just accepted as God preserving his word and it's true, there's 4 things that they did wrong. They omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. And he did this whole sermon on the judgment, mercy, and faith, or the weightier matters of the law. But if he looked into weightier matters of the law and started to wonder, maybe do some historic research.
Oh, thank you for explaining that. Yes, I did mishear that. So that's 4 different classifications, not 3 subsets to weightier matters of the law.
Right. You know, about 125 years before Christ, John Hyrcanus, they took Edomites and circumcised them and brought them into the congregation.
Right.
They weren't a huge number in population. The huge number were the millions of true Israelite Jews, you know, Yehudi,
right.
Israelite house of Judah, living in a country called Judea, the Eudios. But that's what they'd done. They took the enemies of God and brought them into the congregation when circumcision was only to go to Israel, and even earlier to Edomites who would be members of the congregation. It had to be a race of Adam. But they took seed of the serpent mongrels and circumcised them. And so, and not only that, there are other weightier matters of the law, too, but there's different passages that show how they were doing an end run around the law and violating the spirit of the law. But this guy is just as, you know, everybody on that First Amendment radio, including the host, Nicholas Arthur, they're just infuriating. I mean, they just really, you send them emails, you give them all these verses. They said, oh, we'll take correction, just give us, you give them the verses, and then they just slander you the next day, saying you said something you didn't even say. I mean, these identity people, they believe that Ham is cursed, and that's where the black people, all this stuff.
Oh, I know.
You know, he doesn't even understand what Christian identity is, and yet, but his mind is certainly closed to the truth, and so he's just preaching himself deeper and deeper into the pit, and so is Chuck Baldwin, and so is Brother Gregory, and he's got some of the worst ones on there, because they're starting to mix up all the patriot stuff, some truth about the tyranny of the world, and, you know.
Oh, yeah, you can see how easy it would be to have it happen that way, because the patriot movement is focusing on the collapse of the economy. The Christians are focusing on the collapse of whatever it is, Revelations, and so it's a marriage right there ready to be made.
Right, but it gets dangerous because it's like George Gordon. I mean, he woke up a lot of people to 10 planks of Communist Manifesto versus the 10 Commandments, and how this government and how all this numbering system's wrong, how insurance is wrong, it's limited liability. I mean, but that's still all worldly stuff.
That's right.
And that doesn't bring us closer to salvation, because that's not coming out of Babylon. It's like what Bruce McCarthy did. He kind of suggested that the Federal Reserve note itself would be the mark of the beast because it had engraving on it. Well, no. The mark of the beast, we did that together before. I mean, we went through all 6 chapters of Revelation and read every passage about mark of the beast. And no, that goes in the hand or in the forehead, just like it says. And you can't buy or sell without it. So, you know, when they try to say that coming out of her, my people, the commandment in Revelation 18, is getting rid of the Social Security number, stopping the use of Federal Reserve notes, or don't have any insurance, or don't get a driver's license, I think they're missing the boat completely.
Right.
I don't believe that that's it at all. It's coming out of this false these false churches that we're in.
That's right.
Coming back into the Word of God, into the truth.
That's right. Coming into the body of Christ so that people can be in unity, worshiping the God that is revealed in the Bible.
Right, in spirit and in truth.
Because that's what people want to do, yeah.
So, because George Gordon, I liked a lot of his things that he did, his court procedures and how he fought the court. Interesting story, interesting guy, but, you know, he just stood up there for years and said, well, we practice the Mosaic Covenant and the Levitical priesthood here in Missouri. And, sorry, George, we don't have the Mosaic Covenant. We're under the New Covenant.
Yeah, well, he doesn't know that.
Yeah. They don't understand it's more than just animal sacrifice that was done away. The feast days under the... Oh, that's the other one I was going to do to show the number 8. I'll have to make a note. I'll do that next time. But, you know, keeping the feast days under the ordinance of the Mosaic Covenant, that's over. But so are the punishments for the sins. The church isn't in control. The church's only power is if there's a man who goes through the court procedure within the church, and that's Matthew 18, you know, if a man offends somebody, you go to that man alone. If he doesn't hear you, you bring another, 2 witnesses with you, 2 or 3. And if he doesn't hear you, then the matter goes before the church. And if he won't hear the church, then he's bound over, he's cast out of the church, excommunication.
Mm-hmm.
repents, it can be brought in. But there's nothing left about stoning for this, or don't have any, in other words, the whole thing about...
Well, that was a nice improvement.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. We live under governments, we've got a state. And it gets very deceitful because we had deep-rooted Christianity within America, denominational, not on the right foundation, but the law of God has been it's just so degenerated so slowly over time, and then rapidly, really, the last 50 years. And Gordon brought up, I was listening to one of his broadcasts, he brought up how these false Jews, the quote Jews, unquote, were recognizing that most commerce was done on Saturday, but they have a problem because that's their Sabbath. And George Gordon happens to believe that's the right Sabbath day anyway, but he brought up a case in the 1920s, I forget the name of it, went to the Supreme Court, and they wanted to get rid of the what they called the blue laws, where everything's shut down on Sunday.
Right.
And the Supreme Court decision basically said, well, no, we're not changing the law. This comes from our God, and you can abstain from selling on Saturday. But see, they wanted a weekend commercial day because they were losing a lot of business on Saturday. So Supreme Court struck it down. So that people will say, well, see, we're a godly country. Well, you're a little older than me, and I'm 60 now, and I remember late 50s. I turned 6 years old in 1960. Remember when the malls started coming in? Suddenly we have these great shopping centers called malls.
Yeah, but you're Midwestern. You guys had blue laws way, decades after we got rid of ours.
Yeah, it went at different times in the country, but you can remember, though, that basically most things did shut down on Sunday.
Oh, absolutely, Keith. Right here in Glendale, that's absolutely true. And they no longer do that.
Yeah, it's just another sign of the time. Mm-hmm. Everything was shut down, and now nothing is.
That's correct.
I mean, not everything.
Everything was shut down except a couple of just, real little exceptions. Emergency situations, like, even the drugstores were shut down.
Yeah. And he went through examples of kind of, where hey, you wouldn't even be able to get gas in these certain parts in certain cities, and couldn't go to the grocery store. I mean, you had to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just another sign.
That's right.
Right. And if you think back and you say this is 1950s or 60s, about 60 years or so, and then you couple that with the staggering exponential increase in divorce, and then add on to that taboo. They'll talk about homosexuality and exploded. Talk about same-sex marriage, but they won't talk about interracial marriage. And if you understand the covenant law and the creation order and why Adam's unique and why Adam must be separate, marry within itself, and let's face it, the only Edomites we have left on the earth, because all those areas where they used to dwell in the Middle East and India, they're all mixed now.
And Europe.
Yeah, well, Europe, but it says Europe was pretty much, they always had the tares among them, but the vast majority of the population were Israelites.
Well, they're not anymore.
Well, I think in the northern European countries...
No, it's over in Europe. The Swedes have all fled to the the forests, because there have been so many rapes by the Arabs against the Swedish women in the cities.
Oh, no, I know it's skyrocketing and that too, but look at America. In fact, he has, maybe I can find that one chart.
Yeah, I think it's about the same in northwestern Europe as about like it is in America.
Yeah, I still think America and England, we still have a white majority, but...
Well, what do you call white? If you call white what we used to call white, we are in the minority. We're under 50%.
I'm not sure.
Okay, but don't forget, Keith, you're way up there in the last little island of humanity.
Well, no, I know the big city, I'm taking that into... Oh, he's got this here, let's see. There's some charts on this. This is Halley's handbook again, too. Let's see. He gives the sources up here at the beginning, He says, religions of the world, roughly, as of 1961. Total world population, 2.5 billion.
Right, and now we're about 4 billion.
Well, they say 7 billion.
I'm sorry, you're right, I'm wrong. It's about 7 billion. That's right.
Protestant Christianity at that time was 240 million, and Roman Catholic Christianity 400 million. Now, these are all statistics. These may be wrong.
But remember, half of those Catholics are not white.
No, they can't be, because if we have, I believe, about 500 million true Israelites of the white race on the earth.
Well, I hope you're right.
Well, if the Catholic Church has 1.2 billion members, well, then they have a lot of non-Israelites who can't be members of the Bible.
That's right.
Covenants and the law were given to them. But
that's right.
Anyways, it's kind of interesting because he had, let's see, he says, religious situation by continents. North America, population 220 million. Protestant Christianity, 75 million. Roman Catholic Christianity, 50 million. So about 125 million out of 220 million at that time. South America, population 110 million. No, I don't think so, because Brazil, I don't know. But Roman Catholic Christianity, there was 60 million, Protestant only 10 million. So Europe, total population 500 million. Roman Catholic 240 million, Protestant 120 million.
But that was in the 60s, and I agree that in the 60s, Northwestern Europe was predominantly white. But there's been, since 1963, there's been this huge influx of Muslims coming in from the protectorates of the British Empire.
Yeah, well, really, I think most of this influx of both Africans into certain countries in Europe and Muslims into other countries in Europe, most of that's been done in the last 20 years.
I agree with you. And that's why I'm saying that now Northwestern Europe is as bad as America.
Well, there's still America, this whole thing, you get your Rick Wiles on True News, and you got your different groups. These people are so brainwashed by the media, even though they claim to be wide awake and don't trust the media, but all they talk about is Sharia law. And we've had, Muslims, and we've got these mosques, and they got Dearborn, Michigan, but overall, it's not a very large population in America, and,
Dearborn, Michigan is a tiny oasis. Because, you see, the South is full of Negroes, absolutely stuffed with Negroes. I visited the South. We're stuffed with Negroes and Mexicans. The Midwest is pretty badly shot, including St. Louis. They're stuffed with Mexicans and Negroes. But the more you get toward you, the whiter it gets.
Well, it gets down to even city population size. If I go to Fort Wayne, there's about 1/4 of the city is all black, in the southeast section. But here in Columbia City, there's only 9,000, and they only have a couple blacks. There's Mexicans, but few. It's not that many. But you're right. I understand what you're saying. But you go into any large city. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I grew up right before all the white flight, and the suburbs were all built up, and all the housing developments, and people were pouring out of there in the 40s and 50s, to get away, because the blacks were huge. And the city went from, I don't know, I think it was up to 1.5 million, but with the white flight, it went down to about 800,000. The majority were black. It's just how it was, because, the law written in their heart and their mind, they wanted to be a separate people, but they also were just darn sick of being victimized by them. So, I grew up, born in 1954, and all I ever knew was suburban life in white America. And then they introduced a black into our high school.
Oh yeah, me too. One black person. Everybody freaked out.
And the Italians among us went nuts and started throwing chairs and food around the cafeteria, and it started a little riot, and all that. It was just, brother, remembering back on some of those times, I wish I knew in high school what I know now.
But what happens, then I went to Santa Barbara High School, and they did have a certain black population, probably 10%, and I was surprised to see that the black people totally kept to themselves. And apparently that's still going on. I'm reading reports about schools where there's alleged integration, and they say it's really surprising because the school numbers reflect that they're an integrated school, but everybody sticks to themselves. And this is 2015, and they're still doing it. Mm-hmm. It's just like a natural law, like you said.
Mm-hmm. But it gets me, with my job, I had to go out to homes to give them quotes on siding and windows, and I went to, whites and blacks and Jews and Hindus and, Pakistan, Indian people, and I mean, all kinds. And I would go into, an older black couple home, and most of them I went to actually were professing Christians, and they were very nice, and I didn't have any, I don't hate them because they're black.
I know you don't. That's what makes you so outstanding as a Christian identity preacher. You're the only one that I've run into that doesn't have a bad mouth. I mean, you've heard these guys talk. They start talking really horribly when they talk about this subject.
Yeah, it's not like it's hard enough to introduce the biblical truth about race without having to have these people,
Yeah, they descend into this gutter language, and it's horrifying. They all do it. There's not one that doesn't. Not one, I don't think, except you.
It's just, Christ the rock of offense. It's offensive to people to hear the truth. And why make it 10,000 times worse, being deliberately offensive with language that their minds are programmed to hate? And that's the other thing. This is why I started this, and it gets a little more complicated, but, we went through the three important parts on Romans 9, and see, when William Fink starts teaching that, everyone's going to be exterminated, but all the white people, all Israelites, and even back to Adam, will all be saved, and we'll be the only people on the earth.
Right.
Here's Romans 9, the other part that we didn't get to yet, but it says, verse 27, Isaiah also crieth concerning Israel, though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, a remnant shall be saved. He's quoting right from Isaiah 10, verse 22.
Right.
William Fink talks about ultimate reconciliation, as many others do in the denominations. But right there is one verse that shows that he's lying.
That's right. It absolutely contradicts that.
That's what I mean. So anyway.
That's right.
Well, we're almost, we're coming up on 2.5 now, so.
Well, okay, let's wrap it up, because I'm getting tired.
Yeah, I am too. We'll just call it a day for now, and take care, Mona. Christ keep, and God bless, and we'll try it again on Sunday, I guess.
Thanks for a wonderful discussion. I'm glad we got this done, and I'll get it up there as soon as possible.
Well, it's nice talking to you. I just still keep praying for you and hoping that you're going to, profess to be a believer one of these days.
Well, I'm a believer. I'm just not a literalist.
Yeah. All right, we'll talk about it some more.
Okay, bye-bye.
You have a good night, Mona.
Thank you.
Well, the bank had